What does it take for two former partners, once split by politics, pride, and opposing ambitions, to find their way back to each other more than 5 decades later? In January 2026, Singapore Airlines and Malaysia Airlines formally sealed a joint business partnership after receiving regulatory approval from both Singapore and Malaysia. On the surface, it looked like a pragmatic commercial decision. Coordinated flight schedules, joint fare products, revenue sharing on certain routes, expanded code sharing, and deeper cooperation on corporate travel. But beneath the headlines lies a far more compelling story, one that stretches back to the birth of both airlines, their dramatic separation in 1972, and the vastly different paths they took over the next half-century. In this video, we explore how these two airlines born from the same roots diverged so dramatically, and why, after half a century apart, they are choosing to work together again. To understand why this reunion is happening now, we must return to where it all began. Both airlines trace their origins to Malayan Airways Limited, founded in the 1930s in Singapore. Over time, as political realities shifted, the airline evolved. After the formation of Malaysia and Singapore's eventual separation in 1965, the carrier was renamed Malaysia Singapore Airlines, or MSA. It was jointly owned and, by most accounts, commercially successful. But success could not mask a growing strategic disagreement. Singapore and Malaysia had different visions for what their shared airline should become. Singapore, lacking a large domestic market, wanted to focus on building a strong international network, long-haul routes that would connect Southeast Asia to Europe, Australia, and beyond. Malaysia, by contrast, prioritized developing domestic connectivity and strengthening routes within the country. These conflicting ambitions eventually became irreconcilable. In 1972, MSA was dissolved. Its assets were divided. Out of the split emerged two separate national carriers, Singapore Airlines and Malaysia Airlines System, later known simply as Malaysia Airlines. From that moment on, the two airlines, born of the same DNA, began writing very different stories. Singapore Airlines quickly established itself as a global premium brand. It positioned itself at the top end of the market, investing heavily in service quality, cabin products, fleet modernization, and operational efficiency. Over time, it earned a reputation as one of the world's leading airlines, consistently winning international awards and ranking among the best carriers globally. Crucially, although majority owned by Singapore's state investment company Temasek Holdings, Singapore Airlines was run with considerable operational autonomy. Professional management, strict financial discipline, and long-term planning became defining features of the airline's governance. Government intervention was rare and typically measured. Even during moments of tension, such as labor disputes in the 1980s, crises were resolved swiftly to protect the airline's long-term stability. Financially, Singapore Airlines developed a reputation for resilience. Aside from the extraordinary disruption caused by the COVID-19 pandemic, it consistently generated profits and paid dividends. When the pandemic nearly crippled global aviation, Temasek stepped in with a record-breaking rescue package, ensuring survival. Within a few years, Singapore Airlines rebounded strongly and recorded its highest ever annual profit by May 2023. Malaysia Airlines' trajectory, however, unfolded very differently. In its early decades after the split, Malaysia Airlines performed well. By the 1980s, it was profitable and expanding. But a turning point came in 1994 under then Prime Minister Mahathir Mohamad, when the airline was privatized. Businessman Tajuddin Ramli acquired a controlling stake, financed largely through substantial loans from government-linked institutions. The privatization soon became controversial. Tajuddin had no aviation background, and his acquisition was heavily leveraged. When the Asian financial crisis struck in 1997, the airline struggled. Eventually, the Malaysian government bought back the airline at the same price Tajuddin had paid, despite its deteriorating financial condition. The buyback sparked public outrage. Critics accused the government of using taxpayer funds to bail out a politically connected figure. Tajuddin later defaulted on the loans used to acquire his stake, leading to legal battles and further controversy. Although lawsuits were filed, they were eventually settled under circumstances that raised further questions. The damage to Malaysia Airlines was profound. Financial losses mounted. Leadership turnover became frequent. Strategic direction shifted repeatedly. There were brief periods of recovery. Under CEO Idris Jala in the mid-2000s, aggressive restructuring and cost-cutting returned the airline to profitability for a time. But morale suffered, talent departed, and structural weaknesses remained. By 2011, the airline posted heavy losses again. Then came 2014, the year that would define Malaysia Airlines in global memory. In March, Flight MH370 disappeared en route from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing. Despite extensive international search efforts, the aircraft was never found. The disappearance became one of aviation's greatest mysteries. The airline faced intense scrutiny over its crisis management and communications. Just months later, in July, Flight MH17 was shot down over eastern Ukraine while flying from Amsterdam to Kuala Lumpur. All 298 passengers and crew were killed. The twin tragedies devastated Malaysia Airlines. Passenger confidence collapsed. Financial losses soared. The government launched $1 billion restructuring plan, cutting jobs and routes while attempting to reset the airline's business model. But recovery proved elusive. Subsequent leadership changes disrupted continuity. One CEO declared the airline technically bankrupt and pointed to inflated supplier contracts and systemic inefficiencies. Allegations surfaced that the airline had been paying well above market rates for goods and services. Efforts to overhaul operations were started but not fully completed before more leadership transitions occurred. The COVID-19 pandemic delivered yet another blow. Government injections kept the airline alive, but structural fragilities remained. In 2024, Malaysia Airlines finally reported a profit, buoyed by strong post-pandemic travel demand and higher ticket prices. It appeared briefly that stability might be returning. Then a new series of operational incidents shook confidence again. Several flights experienced technical problems, prompting emergency landings or returns. Though none resulted in fatalities, they revived public anxiety. The aviation regulator shortened the validity of the airline's operating license and cited concerns over maintenance capacity and staffing shortages. Global supply chain disruptions and parts shortages affected many airlines. But observers noted that Singapore Airlines, with its younger fleet and disciplined asset management, weathered similar challenges more smoothly. Malaysia Airlines, meanwhile, struggled with retention of skilled maintenance personnel and recurring restructuring cycles that had eroded institutional strength. By the mid-2000s, the contrast between the two former siblings was stark. Singapore Airlines stood as a profitable global premium carrier with a strong balance sheet and clear strategic identity. Malaysia Airlines was still rebuilding trust, stability, and operational resilience. And yet, despite this divergence, the two airlines had already begun edging closer long before their 2026 formal partnership. In October 2019, they signed an agreement to expand cooperation in scheduling, pricing, sales, marketing, and code sharing. Over the following years, they progressively deepened their commercial ties. Singapore Airlines began code sharing on Malaysia Airlines flights between Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, as well as on routes to London Heathrow and multiple Malaysian domestic destinations. Malaysia Airlines reciprocated by code sharing on Singapore Airlines services from Singapore to Kuala Lumpur, Penang, and other international destinations. In 2024, both carriers introduced reciprocal benefits between their frequent flyer programs, allowing members to earn KrisFlyer miles and enrich points on selected flights. But a full joint business arrangement required regulatory approval. Singapore's Competition and Consumer Commission initially granted conditional approval in 2022 during the COVID-19 period, subject to review once travel demand recovered. When air travel rebounded, the airlines resubmitted their proposal. Concerns were raised about reduced competition on the heavily trafficked Singapore to Kuala Lumpur route, one of the busiest international air corridors in the world. To address these concerns, the airlines committed to maintaining pre-cooperation weekly seat capacity, adding flights as demand increased, reporting data from their low-cost carriers, and appointing an independent auditor to monitor compliance. Regulators also considered broader market developments, including the impending closure of Jetstar Asia, when evaluating competitive dynamics. In July 2025, Singapore's competition watchdog granted conditional approval. Malaysian authorities followed with their own clearance. By January 2026, the partnership was formally in place. So why now? For Singapore Airlines, the rationale is strategic. Southeast Asia remains a highly competitive aviation market. Closer integration with Malaysia Airlines enhances network connectivity, strengthens corporate offerings, and allows better coordination on schedules and pricing. It reinforces Singapore's position as a regional hub, while deepening links with a key neighbour and trading partner. For Malaysia Airlines, the incentives are arguably even stronger. Partnering with one of the world's most respected carriers enhances scale, network resilience, and international relevance. It provides access to broader connectivity, strengthens its competitive standing, and signals confidence to global markets. For both governments, the tie-up reflects economic pragmatism. Singapore and Malaysia share deep people-to-people, business, and tourism links. Air connectivity underpins trade, investment, and labour mobility between the two countries. A structured partnership between their national carriers supports these flows. There is also a symbolic dimension. The two airlines were once one. Their separation mirrored the political divergence of two young nations in the 1970s. More than 50 years later, their cooperation reflects a mature relationship built on mutual benefit rather than rivalry. This is not a merger. Both airlines remain distinct entities with separate identities, management, and ownership. But the partnership marks a new chapter, one shaped less by national pride and more by commercial logic. In the end, the question is no longer why they broke up. History has already answered that. The more compelling question is whether this new chapter, shaped by lessons learned over 5 decades, can deliver what both airlines now seek: stability, growth, and resilience in an industry that rarely forgives mistakes. Time will tell whether this partnership becomes a defining success story or simply another turning point in a long and complex relationship. But aviation is not the only high-stakes bet Malaysia is making. Beyond the skies, another massive transportation project is reshaping the country's future: the East Coast Rail Link. Touted as transformative, it promises connectivity, economic growth, and regional development. Yet critics warn of debt risks and long-term consequences. So is the East Coast Rail Link Malaysia's next game changer, or its next big gamble? Watch the next video as we break it all down.